22 players on a field for 90 minutes kicking a ball. Simple, and yet football has become a mirror for some of the best and worst parts of humanity. It's a global language, and it can deliver a sense of belonging and identity, even an almost spiritual experience. But the game can also divide us deeply, stoking rivalries and us versus them loyalties. The sport can feel hyper-commercialized, and the best talent often drains from the global south to the west. I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Doha Debates podcast.
I think the English Premier League has been, I don't know what anybody else would say, but has been quite advanced in terms of accommodating Muslim players. For example, during the fast, actually letting players fast and letting them break their fast during the game.
Premier League now, every game begins with an absurd display of third-rate pyrotechnics from little black boxes on wheels that produce flames. It's like, what has this got to do with anything? I find this absolutely absurd and demeaning, like we're at Disneyland or at some sort of second-rate theme park. Oh, fire, excitement, hell. It's like, who are you kidding? This is pathetic. It's pathetic.
What politics cannot do, I believe that football managed to do, and managed to recognize us as a full member with full rights because of football. So that is the recognition that football gives. I don't feel or see anything else could give compared to the football that given us as Palestinians.
Our debate today, what kind of identity does football give us? Okay, I'd like to welcome our guest, David Goldblatt, a sports writer and author of The Ball is Round, a global history of football. I've read a lot of your work over the years, so pleasure having you on the program. Honey Thaljieh, co-founder of Women's Football Palestine. Good to have you with us, Honey. And Tony Karon, editorial lead at AJ Plus and former Time Magazine senior editor. Tony, welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We're here in Buenos Aires. I guess one of the simplest ways to put this is that in my household, I mentioned I'm going to Buenos Aires. Girls, what do you want? And the first order was, I want a Messi 10 shirt. The other daughter was like, Maradona 10. And the third said, nah, something a bit different. I don't know, just surprise me, something a bit different, maybe a little bit more hipster. So maybe it's going to be like a Raquelme or a Pablo Aimar River Plate or something. That's all I said. I didn't say I was even going to be discussing football. I said, I'm just going to Buenos Aires. It was synonymous with football and with these icons and these number 10s. What is it, Tony, about this game? And is it the same wherever you go?
Yes. And the reason is I think that this game has been globalized to the point that because of satellite television, I think this really begins in the 1990s, that it facilitates a global civil society sharing in real time a set of experiences that are unprecedented in our ability to share them. So when 1.5 billion people watch the World Cup together in real time, that was never possible, 40, 50 years ago, that essentially everybody is gasping at the same moment. Everybody is cheering. Everybody is elated. It creates a real sense that, time and space have been compacted in the era of globalization. Of course, that's about money that doesn't exist separately from a world economy that we know. But it really strikes me that, for example, I grew up in South Africa listening to BBC World Service report, audio live commentary on Liverpool games. Today, 300 million people in Africa watch the Premier League every weekend live. So I think the reason that your daughters have the sense of football as the global stage, the global performance of something exciting, something they care about, something meaningful, is a product of that. I think 40 or 50 years ago, they would have been unlikely to be making those requests.
And let me then ask you, Honey, so growing up in Bethlehem, in the occupied West Bank, the city is famous for other sort of civilizational, cultural, religious reasons. In the occupied West Bank, Palestinian girl in Bethlehem, tell me what that connection to football was like. Who were your heroes? Where did you watch it? Did you watch it on TV? Were you listening on the radio? What was it like?
It was football was the way in Palestine. Growing up in Bethlehem for me, to get out to the outside world and liberate myself from all the constraints, from the political, cultural, social barriers at all levels. It was just a hobby at the beginning, like when you are 7 years old, you don't know what is beyond football. But at that time, it was just a hobby that, accelerated quickly to become about identity and fighting for justice, equality, human rights, women's rights, and also showing another narrative about the Palestinian people, not a message about destruction, death, despair, but about resilience, about celebration of life, and about identity through football. At that time, I didn't have heroes. It was difficult to look up to someone, specifically as a woman, because at my time, I was the only girl playing in the streets of Bethlehem. So it was really hard to connect with a role model that I want to look up to her and become like her one day. So my models were the big footballers, legends, like Pelé, Brazilian Ronaldo, Maradona, and all of them. Of course, I also struggled to look up to women's names as well at that time, because it was not as popular as today, women's football. And therefore, my role model or my hero was my mom in the house, because she was the one secretly trying to allow me to play football in the narrow streets of Bethlehem. And from there, the struggle started on how to continue playing this beautiful game and take it to another level.
David, what is it about this game? What is it about what it does to us?
It's worth thinking about, what do we actually mean by football? We say it as if we all actually have a shared conception of what this social phenomenon is. I'm not sure that we do. So let's unpack it for a moment. First of all, it's just a game that people play. And that's partly why it's so unbelievably popular, because so many billions of people are actually just playing it in all its many formats, not just 11-a-side, 5-a-side, 7-a-side, in the street, on grass, on sand. It comes in a multiplicity of different forms. And then how do we consume it once we've played it? Well, on the one hand, football is a soap opera. And like all good soap opera, football delivers every single week a cliffhanger. Will we be better next week? Will we score next week? Will we lose next week? That's what keeps us coming back to every soap opera in the world. The game can just turn, as we know, on a few moments, on a single mistake. And that produces hope. This game is not about winning. It's, because most of the time we lose, and it's not about beauty, because most of the time it's very ugly, but it is about possibility. It's about collectivity. It's about solidarity. And for that to be emotionally charged by a game that is relentless.
We've scattered a lot of leaves. Let me pick up a few. Let's hold on to them, investigate them closely. This idea of a theater, this idea almost of a sacred space. Tony, you're a Liverpool fan, as you mentioned. As a United fan, when I heard "You'll never walk alone" in a crowd full of Liverpool supporters, it stirred me. And then I felt, no, that's like the other side. I shouldn't be feeling, I had this dissonance. I was feeling like, no, I shouldn't like this, but it was moving me. It was as if I was a believer in one religion and I went into a church of another and I thought I shouldn't be here. Right? Is that your outlet? Like, I mean, in a sort of basic, tribal, primal way, is that your church?
Yes, 100%. And weirdly, it's it's a televangelical church for most of our lives. And actually, probably most fans of any particular team these days are mostly watching that on television. But the bond that you're talking about, where, okay, Liverpool has this anthem, "You'll Never Walk Alone." It's an expression of solidarity. I was involved in the liberation struggle in South Africa. Singing was an absolutely integral part of mobilization in South Africa. We sung our way to freedom. If you were marching down a street and there was a line of cops, at the end of that street, and things could get very, very nasty, that sense of the crowd's bond and the power it generates, a spiritual bond that kind of lifts people to imagine, as what David was saying, the collective being greater than the sum of its parts. That was very, very powerful there. But I hate to sort of, it sounds like you're demeaning something that meaningful by comparing it with football. But I do see that in a football stadium, people are singing hymns. People are behaving in a way that people behave in religious ceremonies, at least in the Christian tradition and in the Jewish tradition, actually. I'm not sure, I can't speak for Islam, that communal singing is part of that tradition. But I think it's very, very powerful. The one last thing I want to say about your fears of cross-pollination, I think there's something very beautiful about the way fans recognize one another's integrity as communities of devotion to an idea and to the principle of solidarity. So, I'm thinking back to the time of Hillsborough. So, when 93 Liverpool fans die in a stadium crash in a stadium in Sheffield in an FA Cup semi-final. And I remember seeing the TV clips at the time from the following, a few days later, from stadiums in Barcelona, in Milan, of a number of other places, of fans singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," fans who didn't speak English. Were singing this expression of solidarity. This idea of a sacred spectacle that you respect. It might not be your own, but I think you're okay. Like getting goosebumps when we're singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." You'll be all right.
So football is a religion.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, it's fascinating how many people around the world connect to it on different levels, for identity, for liberation, for solidarity, for coming together. It's just fascinating. And in Palestine, this is a symbol, actually, for resilience. It's a symbol for liberation. Although, like, we support international teams. For example, when Barcelona and Real Madrid play in Palestine, the whole country goes upside down. Yeah. They forget all the adversaries, all the challenges, all the bombing, all the destruction, and they meet in a place where they could have a small TV, just cheer up for Barcelona or Real Madrid. So it's just fascinating how such a power can bring billions of people together and like unite them in one simple match with one simple game.
David, talk to me a bit about that. How people see themselves across nations, across borders, across oceans. They see themselves in teams and identify with them.
Good question. Before I do, can I just say, I think there's a key phrase that we're missing so far, which is ritual. That's such an important component of the football experience, is that you're with the same people at the same time in the same place doing the same things, and it is that imbues the experience with some sort of spiritual and greater significance. And I think it's really important for us to think about what is the nature of that ritual. And that ritual, I think it's really important because that ritual has, over the last 150 years, overwhelmingly been made from the bottom up. Football in particular, it is the crowds and the fans who have created that ritual space and that social and spiritual significance. And we live in an era where the powers that be, whether it be UEFA, FIFA, the clubs themselves, are endlessly meddling with the nature of the ritual. And it is not theirs.
How are they meddling?
Well, for example, the Premier League now, every game begins with an absurd display of third-rate pyrotechnics from little black boxes on wheels that produce flames. It's like, what has this got to do with anything? I find this absolutely absurd and demeaning, like we're at Disneyland or at some sort of second-rate theme park. Oh, fire, excitement, hell. It's like, who are you kidding? This is pathetic. It's pathetic. The same with the music that gets played, right? Why is it always music that nobody actually wants to listen to? You know, similarly, I mean, I personally can't bear the whole kind of player escort, as they're called, where the little kids get brought in. It's like, we're about to have a battle here. Why are we pretending we're at a kindergarten? Oh, it's so cute. It's a nice experience for them. I personally absolutely can't bear it. I think it's demeaning and infantilizing for everyone. So I think it's really important. I mean, you know, the Reformation, you know, and the wars of religion were fought over the nature of ritual and the litany. These things are really, really important.
Is football a substitute for violence? And there are those who argue that could be a good thing, you know, because it gets the emotions out. Is it a substitute for violence?
Yes, it's a substitute for a physical aggression, for giving vent to giving vent to aggression at the expense of pain, inflicting pain on others, because maybe there's no real pain involved in the best case scenarios.
Honey Thaljieh?
In my case, for example, football was a tool to get the children away from violence, away from anger, because there's a lot of anger you grew up with, growing up in apartheid, growing up in an occupation. And how to direct your anger, nobody tells you, because nobody explains how can you control your feelings, how can you express what you are going through within such context that knowing tomorrow might not be possible, or unpredictable, insecure situations. So football in that context was the best and only tool to get you out of those thoughts or those tragedies or those situations, because on the football pitch, we are all equal, even if the system is not.
People don't go to war because they've got violent urges inside them. They go there because it's in the interests of their ruling classes and their military-industrial complexes. War and violence is a product of state policy and international relations, and the idea that the outcome of Tottenham versus Arsenal is shaping the international state system is, forgive me, a little naive.
I absolutely agree with David about the problem being created elsewhere. I want to add another situation in which people go to war, which is they're oppressed by colonial violent regimes in which there is no peaceful road for them to free themselves, and they choose national liberation wars. The example I want to refer to, though, is Algeria, because I think that's a very, very powerful story where essentially France is violently colonizing Algeria, and it's telling Algerians, you are not a nation. You are part of France. You are part of us. You're under us. You're second-class citizens of France, but you are part of France. So basically, the FLN, the Algerian Liberation Movement, is like, wait a minute. There are 23 players currently in France, playing in France in French leagues, and some of them, most notably Rachid Mehloufi, are playing in the French national team that's going to the 1958 World Cup. And the Algerian underground goes, you know what, let's get these guys out. They smuggle them out. They risk a lot of, the players themselves are risking jail, torture. They're risking a lot of their underground political resources in order to spirit these players out of France. Mehloufi is in the French World Cup squad. Suddenly he's gone and he pops up. I think it's in Tunisia that they set up. And they create an Algerian national team. Mm-hmm. But there's no Algerian independence yet. There's no Algerian state. The idea, imagine yourselves a nation, begins with football. It's like, yes, we are real. Algeria is a thing. We're a people. We have a flag. We have a shared history, destiny, etc. So I think that's a very powerful example of, you know, a different proximity of war and
let's ask somebody who represented a country that's not yet officially a country that people would hope to be a country.
Yes.
How did it feel for you to represent Palestine on the field when Palestine as a rubber-stamped nation state at the UN and a free Palestine does not exist in reality yet?
I still felt a lot of pride and a lot of identity that I didn't have it off the pitch, but on the pitch. I felt proud and I felt we love life regardless, and we want to show that we have a team, we have talent, we have hobbies, and we have an identity to represent, we have a story to tell. And all those emotions, they came together once the Palestinian national anthem is played, regardless who recognize you or not. On the pitch, we felt recognized. We felt our dignity is back to us. Our identity is represented. And that's what the Palestinian national team represents, whether the men's team or the football, the women's team. Just recently, Palestine was almost going to qualify for the FIFA World Cup when they played with Oman, and they missed the chance to go for another 2 matches to qualify us. But how people cheered up for their team, for national team, just to be there and to play and to compete, regardless of a genocide that's happening at the same time, is just unbelievable. Like, it gets you all the emotion together. You cry, you feel every single part in your body for your country, for the national anthem, for the representation, for the liberation, for the identity that we looked for so many years that we couldn't find it, but I found it on the football pitch. And the same with my teammates and the representation of national teams at all levels. So that's where football is really historic. That's where football gives identity when it's not given by politics, by countries. Football was on the map. Palestine was on the map, on the football map, already in the 20s, but again was recognized in 1998 by FIFA. But until today, we are not on the political map. And that shows a lot for me as a Palestinian, but for many others, that what politics cannot do, I believe that football managed to do, and managed to recognize us as a full member with full rights because of football. So that is the recognition that football gives. I don't feel or see anything else could give compared to the football that given us as Palestinians.
And I want to suggest a lot of us feel that. It's not just Palestinians, of course. Palestinians are feeling this much more profoundly and much more deeply. But allies and supporters beyond are looking at moments like that and like, yeah, that's fantastic. And that's an emotional as well as a political thing.
There's a famous Benzema quote, especially given the context of the rise of the far right in France, when the Le Pens were mouthing off. He said, when I score, so he's of Algerian descent, played for France. He said, when I score, I'm French. When I don't, I'm Algerian. Unpack that for me.
Well, so too Mesut Ozil said the same thing about his German roots and his Turkish roots. Romelu Lukaku has said exactly the same in the same words about his African roots and his Belgian roots. I mean, it seems to me that it is one of the great virtues of modern football is the possibility of inventing and putting in public these incredibly complex migratory histories. It seems to me, particularly in the example of England, because we could look at this story, we could look at the experience of Benzema and Ozil, and it's like racism, 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 exclusion. And of course, that is widespread across football. On the other hand, I know of very few other spaces in European politics, certainly, where the possibility of such unabashed levels of integration becomes possible. I mean, look at the England national team these days. Impossible to imagine an England national team that is just white. It is inconceivable, even, over the last 30 years, that you could equate Englishness with whiteness has been rendered completely nonsensical by the experience and performance of the England men's national team. And I think that's a really amazing and extraordinary phenomena. So football can be a space in which racism and exclusion and nativism can and is expressed.
Which one's winning?
Where and when? Right now in England, anti-racism is winning. I would say.
Can I add something to this, actually, talking about the Premier League and the UK national team? Actually, let's take the example of Mohamed Salah, Liverpool. I mean, how much...
Look at him smiling like a proud dad.
I mean, you know, like the Islamophobia and how the stereotypes and the mindsets about different cultures, different people, different religion. But when Mohamed Salah started to play in Liverpool, there are a study from Stanford University that 18.8% dropped of Islamophobia and a crime dropped down because of the representation of Mohamed Salah as a hero and as a great football player that many people in Liverpool and beyond looked up to him to change the whole mindset and the whole idea about Islam, about Egyptian, about the culture, about Arab in general. And that is really powerful example on what David was saying about a world hopefully less racist, less discriminating, less through the football icons that the football bring to us. And there are many people who try to put you into boxes, even without trying to know how capable you are, how great you are, how talented you are. And that is still deeply rooted in societies, unfortunately.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the alter ego, because I can see, you know, as you say, the Liverpool fans sing, if he scores another few, I'll be Muslim too.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There's like literally this kind of... And I think the English Premier League has been, I don't know what anybody else would say, but has been quite advanced in terms of accommodating Muslim players. For example, during the fast, actually letting players fast and letting them break their fast during the game, etc. So, but then you compare it to France, where Islamophobia is so much part of the French establishment's self-identity that, you know, they've never really decolonized themselves.
Can I add something to race with you, Honey? Gender. Where are we at right now?
It's challenging, but there is kind of a movement that it's trying to bridge the gap. But it's definitely challenging. If you talk about men's football and women's football, there is a huge gap. Let's start with history. The FIFA World Cup started in 1913 in Uruguay, and women's football started the World Cup in 1991. So there's more than 60 plus years between those two World Cups. And of course, if we look about the investment between men's football and women's football, there is a huge gap. But now it's shifting. Why? Because women's football has proven that it is not just a charity, or it's not a charity. It's a product, it's a brand. So now the hope is 27, the Women's World Cup will be in Brazil, that for the first time ever, this will generate revenue, because most of the revenues that, or all the revenues that are generated are only from the Men's World Cup. Until 23, the Women's World Cup has always been a loss. But 23 was the first time the FIFA Women's World Cup generated millions of revenues, that now the pressure is so high to build up on it.
What is the biggest challenge right now when it comes to money in football, and is it a healthy thing?
Football clubs lose money. The Premier League as a whole is £11.8 billion in debt. And a very small amount of that is like Syria, the sort of debt, you know, like Tottenham borrows money from the bank to build a stadium, standard form. Majority of it is basically handouts from various owners over the years that they never expect the money to come back, or it is buying players on the never, because now when a player is bought, you play a quarter up front and the rest is constantly being projected into the future. This is the great illusion about football, is that somehow this is a space for making profits.
So what, is it for soft power, ultimately?
Well, it's a whole different thing. So certainly for the UAE, its ownership of Manchester City is clearly part of a wider soft power state program. For some, it is a rich man's toy and plaything. I mean, I think to a great extent, you know, the global super rich and the oligarchs are so spiritually barren, so emotionally empty, so incapable of generating actual real meaning and purpose from their wealth and their status and their power. They are so struck down by ennui that they buy football clubs as a form of ersatz community over which they can spread their noblesse oblige. I do think that's what's going on. Why else would you do it? If you're serious about making money, don't buy a football club. Buy shares in Meta. Abramovich dropped nearly $2 billion in his time at Chelsea. He never made a penny. He never had any intention. So I think that's the first thing to recognize is all the talk about it's a big business and commercialism. This is the most insane and unconventional economic space you can possibly imagine.
Capitalism can be incredibly destructive, but it can also actually be a driver of a lot of progress. Question is how it's regulated. That's really, where we land, because you can't imagine an ideal world in which money is not going to make a difference. But if there are limits set on the damage it can do, and it can be channeled into positive outcomes.
Is it regulated well?
No, not well enough. No.
Barely would be my description when it comes to regulation. Yeah. But let's take the case of Africa. So Tony earlier said 300 million people watching the Premier League every weekend. It's probably, I reckon it's probably 500 million. That data's from the Premier League like in 2009. And Africa, if you go back to the 1990s, had a fabulous domestic football scene. The Ghanaian derby between Hearts of Oak and Asante Kotoko. People were queuing up 3 days beforehand outside the stadium to secure their place. No, they barely get anyone coming to the game these days. I mean, African domestic football has absolutely collapsed. Most places, before you draw up the schedule, you're going, right, when's Arsenal playing? Because we can't have a game when Arsenal playing because nobody will come. And there is it's even worse in the sense that you might at least hope that with all of these African players coming to the rich leagues, at least there would be some trickle of money back into African football. But as the overwhelming majority of African footballers who make it outside of the continent are trained in private academies, they're not in teams within the kind of conventional pyramid structure. That money all disappears back into those academies and into Swiss bank accounts, and none of it is going back into African football.
Honey, on the individual level, still trying to sort of look at the impact of money. And I think of a hypothetical kid in Bethlehem with a lot of talent. Maybe this kid doesn't have to be at the level of Mo Salah or a Messi or Ronaldo. Maybe this kid just has enough talent to be an average Premier League player or La Liga player or Serie A player. That level of that transformational aspect to that person's life. I don't know. The average salary would be what, $50,000, $60,000 a week. Talk to me a bit about that hope and that dream and that yearning to make it in the big leagues, especially for kids from places like Palestine.
This is really important, actually. I just wanted to add, money creates power. It's like you cannot separate money from power. A lot of billionaires, they would like to own clubs because part of it, or a huge part of it, is power, right? And if power is used correctly, then the benefit can be massive in terms of investments, in terms of how you bring back money to the game. And I'm talking here about the legacy that the football can leave, the social impact that, yes, you generate money, but how much you invested back into football, how much opportunities you give, how much football pitches you build, how much infrastructure you facilitate in those countries that is mostly needed. If we talk about Africa, if we talk about the Middle East, if we talk about the global South in any way, money is definitely much needed because it can open so many doors. If we talk about the little girl or little boy in the streets of Bethlehem, of having a dream one day to play for the national team, let's say, like not just only to play internationally for other football clubs, to play for the national team and represent their country on a high level, it's still a dream for many Palestinian children. It's a dream that they don't even dare to dream it. The fact that you cannot dare to dream because of all the context surrounding you, whether it's poverty, whether I'm not talking just about Palestine, whether it's poverty, whether it's extremism, whether it's war, whether it's a harsh context you grew up in, a lot of children don't even have the ability to dream because they know it might never happen. The fans and the solidarity for the Palestinian people all around the world showed that the power is with the people. And that gives a lot of hope in the context where we are losing hope, in a situation where it is really difficult. It's a genocide that's going on. Stadiums are smashed, infrastructure are destroyed, hospitals, children, men and women. A genocide unfolding in front of all our eyes. And barely you see a stand from politics, international communities. The question remains, how do we handle this? What is the next step? And if this pressure from the fans will make the shift, I see it's coming, and I believe it's coming, because the power of the people and the power of the fans should never be estimated. Now we have seen the Palestinian flags in all the stadiums. No one can ban it anymore, I believe. It's everywhere. In every single match I see, we could see it more, but a lot of football clubs took a stand and raised the Palestinian flags, not just to stand with politics. I don't talk about politics here, to talk about solidarity and humanity. That's our topic. We don't want to talk about politics. It's not a football match who you are with or without. It's about a humanity and solidarity and the resilience of those people who are fighting for justice and equality at all levels. How we gonna support them? How can we feel with them? How can we give them the platform to one day dream that they will be independent? One day they will have the same equal rights in football and beyond, because that's where it comes. Football is a reflection of a society. For me, 90 minutes on the pitch, it's a reflection of a whole of a society. I think it's sad that racism and stereotypes and discrimination is heavily seen in that context, because for many people or countries, Palestinians do not matter. We are just numbers. It's sensitive, it's political, when in fact, it's about humanity. It's about stopping the genocide, stopping the war, give the basic rights to the Palestinian people to live in freedom and justice, whether it's in the football arena or at all levels, because this is a struggle for more than 77 years. It didn't happen just recently. And therefore, I am happy to see the fans and footballers and clubs are raising up their voice. And this gives me personally hope. And for people who fight for justice and humanity, let's put it that way, humanity, it gives hope to all of those, because then we see that the world's still okay. There are people who are standing for right, no matter what.
David?
That was very powerful. Thank you. It's really good to hear it. I think we just need to go back a little. Even before Gaza happened, Israel should have been kicked out of football a decade ago. It should have been kicked out of every sporting institution. It was completely clear when the Palestinian Football Association and its allies took the case to FIFA for the first time, I believe in 2015, arguing that Israel systematically broke FIFA statutes. They allowed teams to play in their league who are on occupied land in the West Bank, as defined by the UN. They have a systematic problem with racism inside their stadiums, which I can testify to, having been to quite a lot of football in Israel and heard an unbelievable level of anti-Palestinian racism and expressions of violence. They have systematically undermined Palestinian football by refusing players the opportunity to enter and leave freely from the West Bank and Gaza to participate in international tournaments. All of these things are explicitly against FIFA's statutes. This was agreed by Willy Lemke, who was the German social democrat who was working as the special rapporteur on sport for the UN, who ruled on this matter in 2017. It is entirely legally unambiguous. If any other state, if any other football association was guilty of anything close to this, they would have been out of FIFA faster than you can imagine. So even before we get to Gaza, the case is absolutely rock solid. Israel should have been removed from international football, and I would say there's probably a pretty good case to remove it from every other single sporting federation. Why has this not happened? I mean, as Honey has argued, there is within the unreflective elites who operate inside sport an uncritical acceptance of that mainstream position. Israel right, Palestine wrong, with undertones of Islamophobia and racism.
I want to take a breath and take us sort of into extra time. I guess it's sort of 3-3, and it's been a thrilling game, and now we're into extra time, and legs are tiring. Maybe let me offer up a perspective of my own as to how pessimistic I am about the future of football. And then I'm going to ask all of you for your thoughts. Maybe let's fast forward 20 years. Maybe this is just a consequence of me growing up sort of in the 80s and 90s and Manchester United winning all the time in the 90s, that I'm nostalgic for things seeming amazing back then. But right now, maybe I'm just a guy in his 40s who's a curmudgeon because I watch VAR and it drives me insane. The video assistant referee, every time, no team can celebrate a goal. David, you speak about the ritual. You can't even have the ritual anymore because the entire stadium erupts, but then they're told, wait, hang on, we're checking the lines. Oh, sorry, offside or a shirt tug or something. No goal, or whatever it might be.
What's left to English referees, who are just terrible.
So that's one example for me, tied into the commercialization, tied into the money, tied into a kind of mechanization of it all right now. We think of AI, as you mentioned, Honey. Now I watch it and I think I don't enjoy this. It feels weird. People say, oh, the game's gone, right? Maybe I'm just getting old, right? And so I think 20 years down the line, there's probably going to be more and more of this. And I'm going to be that guy in his 60s going, I don't recognize this game because it's like an episode of Black Mirror and not that theater and spectacle and ritual that I learned to love throughout my life. Where do you guys stand on this? What will the game look like in about 20 years, Tony?
I could talk about VAR for a second, and I want to invoke a quote from my friend Teju Cole, the writer, who when it first came along said, this is terrible because if you don't have the "we was robbed," if there's a perfect, if the ref doesn't make a mistake, you don't have anyone to blame when you fail. Okay, but putting that aside, I think the problem with VAR is that there's still English referees in the Premier League looking at the VAR, getting 35% of their calls wrong because they're just not very good referees. Sorry, David.
Not a representative of the of PGMOL.
I would just say this: the game has evolved through so many iterations, and it is in many ways unrecognizable just as a physical spectacle. In a way that's better, frankly. And I think football is the same for the reasons David articulated at the very beginning, the magic of what the spectacle represents. I don't think that's going to go away. I think they're going to mess it up. I think this extraterritoriality, this thing where suddenly they want to play a La Liga game in Miami. I'm like, no, the crowd are so much part of the chemistry of the spectacle. If you take that away, if you remove a club, like American clubs, I don't know if you know American sporting franchises, the LA Lakers, it's like, where are the Lakers in LA? The Utah Jazz, like, where's the Jazz in Utah? It's like, no, Utah Jazz was in New Orleans, LA Lakers was in Minnesota or Michigan. You can just move whole franchises to other locations. You completely lose the fan base. If you ever did that in football, that would really be a mortal blow. But that said, the magic of the spectacle is not going to change, and that's where my faith is and hope is.
So that will transcend.
Yeah.
Everything, all these challenges. Okay, an optimist. What did
Come
you
back
say?
to me and we can talk again if I'm still here.
Honey.
I would see it will be more modernized to a way that it makes it more exciting. I'm not against technology in football at all because it can make the game fair. more fair. Like, for example, we talk about the VAR. At the beginning, nobody liked it. But now in the stadiums, everywhere, when there is a misjudgment of a referee, everyone makes this sign. Everyone, regardless. And then they want to wait for the excitement. The referee goes to the screen. He sees the video
That's
or not.
built into the ritual
and
now,
the
see?
mics over there. It adds to the excitement.
Right.
And I feel like technology is good in that context because it makes the game fair. People are less disappointed, which is the fans, the magic of football. It's the people and the fans that are watching for their teams playing. And then it will just show that, okay, we review. It shows that there is a penalty. Here you go. So I feel technology is good. It will add value to the game, but of course not overuse anything. If you use or overuse anything, it becomes counterproductive. Modern stadiums, we have seen in Qatar, the stadiums in Qatar, fabulous stadiums that the Qatar World Cup has built. The infrastructures are amazing. So they transform the fan experience completely. Technology, I would say. Now, artificial intelligence, for example, it reached to more fans around the world. I don't know if you have noticed the extra camera that introduced to the referee. While running in the field, he shows part of the excitement to the world and to the fans that's what's happening on the pitch. So you might argue, you might agree, you might disagree.
You have to bleep out what the players are telling the referee.
But it adds value, definitely. So
it also makes it feel like a video game, which actually is a big part of the reality of most football fans now.
I think technology is good if it's used properly and in moderation.
David, you were telling me off air that as you approach your 60th, you're reading the classics. So 20 years down the line, what's football going to look like, and how's that going to vibe with where you want to see the game?
20 years from now, what I see is a world that has exceeded 2 degrees centigrade. I see a world already being decisively impacted by the climate crisis, in very serious trouble. Football in and of itself is probably responsible as part of the global sports industry and alongside the sportswear industry for a couple of percentage points of global carbon emissions. Not a huge amount, you might argue, but probably, at least equivalent to Germany, and nobody's giving Germany a pass on the climate crisis. So football and sport has its work cut out to transform its carbon emissions, most of which come from the polyester that football shirts are made of and currently cannot be recycled. However, were football to actually put its climate house in order, it is a remarkable resource for climate action. In a world in which trust in elite, in scientists, and in the possibility of a hopeful future diminish every day, football remains a space in which trust continues to exist. Football is a space in which we believe that we're only as good as our weakest link, and that is an essential element of a response to the climate crisis. Above all, football is one of the last spaces in which we really believe in our hearts that last-minute turnarounds are possible. Miracles can happen. You were there at the 1999 Champions League final.
And Solskjaer has won it.
And there you go. And on the one hand, it's trivial. And on the other hand, this is one of the most precious popular cultural resources available to contemporary humanity. If football were actually to take serious climate action, the details of which are for another day, and to mobilize these precious cultural resources that are encoded in the game and are near universal on this divided planet, the possibility of a different and more optimistic and more peaceful future is there.
You guys were very, very powerful. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect point at which to bring to an end this discussion. This has been a weird inversion for me because usually when the cameras are off, I talk football with guests and then the cameras switch on and then we talk about the thing we're paid to do. And this is the first time we sort of switched on the cameras and we get to talk football. So it's been wonderful. It's been a pleasure. It's been an education. Thank you so much, Tony Karon, Honey Thaljieh, and David Goldblatt. I wish you all the best and I thank you so much for sharing your time with us here on the Doha Debates podcast.